name is Mike, and I get to be pastor here at Mission Valley Church. If this is your first Sunday, we're so glad that you're here. And if I've never met you, I'd love to do that. And so there's a couple ways we can meet. First is this. Right after service, I'm going to be in the lobby for just a little bit, and then I'm going to go over to newcomers. You'd be like this, hey, could I go to newcomers lunch today if I just showed up today? Yeah, just go. It'll be fine. We'll find plenty of food for you. Just go over to newcomers. It's over in the chapel. We'd love to meet you. So I can meet over there. Another way that we can meet, if you want, in the lobby, we have an info table. Laura's out there. She got a whole team of people out there. They would love to meet you, shake your hand, and get some information from you so that we can follow up with you this week. I'll call you, text you. We'll be in touch because she gets me all that stuff, and then I can do it. And then another way, here's what else we can do if you want. Send me a text, 602-763-3331. Is this one of those places where you could text the pastor? Tax the pastor? No, but you could text the pastor. I'm all messed up, Wes, because I missed the signal, and now it's like, I'm going to just try and refocus, all right? Me and you, we're gonna get it right again at the end. You did it right. I didn't do it right. Anyways, he's fine. It's me. Anyways, you've joined us for the third week of a series that we're calling Hebrews, A Better Promise. We're just continuing to walk through this letter to the Hebrews. It's a letter written to them, and this section of the letter would sound like, well, there's a better promise being kept. There's a better promise being made. Like, we have a promise that we've been saved from death to life. We have this promise that Jesus will continue to work in our lives. We have this promise that one day we will be with Jesus in heaven for eternity, and it really is just a better promise. It's just a better promise. There was a promise, and now a better promise has come along. And I don't know about you guys, but I just like the better stuff. Like if somebody says, well, do you want this thing or the better thing? Well, I'll take the better thing. Like, do you want this meal or the better meal? Well, I'd like the better meal. I don't know about you guys, I like better stuff. I like when it's better. When I was a teacher, this feels like a long time ago, and what seems like a lifetime ago, I used to be a teacher. I went to school at ASU, go Devils. Big win last night? Yes, thank you. I went to school, ASU, and I graduated, and I became a teacher. And I got my first teaching job, and I taught 7th and 8th grade social studies, and I taught in a very low-income school. They told us it was a low-income school when I got hired there. And they said that the reason that we would know that it was low-income is because 90% of our students were on free and reduced lunch, but I could tell you that it was low-income just by looking at the way the kids showed up. Their clothes told on them. Their shoes told on them. They were struggling. They were low income. But though they were low income, they were not low pride, and they were not low work ethic. They were some hardworking people. Good, strong, hardworking people that came from good, strong, hardworking, blue-collar families where mom and dad were working hard, just trying to make it, and they just didn't have a lot of stuff for the extras. So they didn't come to school on the first day with fancy new lunch boxes and fancy new backpacks, and they didn't come back from Christmas break with lots of new stuff. They were low income, high pride, high work ethic, low income. And early on in the school year, me and another teacher started talking about, wouldn't it be cool to take them on an 8th grade trip? We had this thing. We had this really cool thing that young teachers have. Young teachers have it. Young pastors have it. It's called idealism. Like you're idealistic. You get excited. You have this other cool, it's like a superpower. It's called optimism. You believe big stuff can happen. Cool stuff can happen. And I tell new teachers and new pastors, when you lose it, get out. Get out of the way and let somebody else come in. Don't be up there preaching if you've lost optimism and hope and idealistic stuff. Just get out of the way and let some young person come up and get it done. So we started talking, me and this teacher, me and Miss Arietta. We said, hey, it would be so cool to take these kids on an 8th grade trip. We wanted this trip to be something that they had to sort of earn. And we said, well, it's got to be a lot of different stuff. We want to see them put in a good effort with their grades and their behavior. We want them to earn it, and it needs to be something big. And so we called all the 8th graders into the room. We got all these 8th graders in the room. There's about 100 of them there. We bring them into the room, and we said, hey, we would like to take you on an 8th grade trip. We've never done that as a school before. It's never happened before. We'd like to do it. We'd like to take you somewhere, and we want to know where you would like to go. Because I read somewhere that if you get kids involved in the decision-making process, they'll be more interested in it. So I was like, where would you like to go? We want to get buy-in. It's called buy-in. I read that in a teacher book. Let's get some buy-in here and see where you want to go. And so the first kid raised his hand, and he said, hey, could we go to the park and do like a park day? And I was like, wow, that sounds fun. That sounds like a pretty cool idea. At the end of 8th grade, you've worked really hard. We can take you to the park, and we have a park day. That sounds like fun, but maybe something a little bit bigger. And they sat there and they were kind of quiet. I said, something a little bit bigger. And we're thinking something bigger than that. And so another little kid raised his hand up. This boy raised his hand. And he goes, hey, can we have like a pizza day and a water day? And I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, maybe we could get some pizza and everybody could have a piece of pizza and we could do water day right here at school. And I was like, hey, that sounds fun. We could get some water balloons. We could do something that sounds like fun. But I was thinking something a little bigger. I'm just thinking something maybe just a little bit bigger, a little bit better than that. And so finally, this other kid raises his hand and says it like real sheepishly, like real quiet. Hey, Mr. Lee, could we go to Castles and Coasters? And the room got quiet. And then this little girl, Tanetti, who turned out to be one of my favorite students, she said, hey, stupid, he's not going to take us to Castles and Coasters. We don't have any money. What do you think, Mr. Lee's got all this money in his pocket? And everybody laughed, and it was funny. And then I said, hey, how about we go to Disneyland? And you could hear the room just went dead quiet. I said, what about we go to Disneyland? I said, what if we went to Disneyland? And the room was dead quiet. I said, what if we work really hard? What if we raise some money? What if we send out some letters and try to get some sponsorships? What if we get some money together and the whole class rents a bus and goes and does a turnaround trip to Disneyland, and you could hear a pin drop in that room? It was dead quiet in that room because in that moment, I was calling those kids to something better. Myself and the other teachers, we were calling them to something better, so much better than they'd ever dreamed of, and they were dead silent, wondering if they could believe us. They were dead silent, wondering, hey, can I believe them? Can I believe this? Can I believe it enough to get excited about it? Could I believe that this could be possible? I was calling them to something better, and they had to decide if they could believe and follow. In today's passage from Hebrews, we see that the people who have believed in Jesus, people who are Christians, people like you and me are being called to something better. As a matter of fact, that's our big idea today. Church, Jesus is calling us to something better. He's just calling us to something better. You see, up until this time in this old covenantal system, there were all these rules and regulations and things like that. And Jesus has come along and said, I am calling you to something better. I'm calling you to a relationship with me. I'm calling you to be where I am. I'm calling you to be my people. And the people are getting this letter, and they're having to come up with the answer to this question, can we believe? Can we believe for that bigger thing, that better thing that Jesus is calling us to? Like 8th graders in a classroom, I'm going to ask you this morning, can you believe? And so in today's passage, we're going to walk all the way through Hebrews chapter 9. It's a nice long chapter. We're going to try to get through the whole thing. We were able to get through it in first service. I hope we can do it again. We're going to get through this whole passage, and from it, we'll make 5 points about how Jesus is calling us to something better. And the first is this: Jesus is calling us not to the temple, but to his Father's house. Jesus is not calling us to the temple. He's calling us to his Father's house. Jesus is not calling to a place. He's calling us to his place. If you were Jewish and you saw the temple, you'd really want to know what it was like in there. This letter was written to people that are literally walking around Jerusalem. They're seeing Jerusalem. They're making pilgrimages to Jerusalem, and the temple still stands. And they're like, I wonder what it's like in there. I wonder what it's like if you could get past the inner curtain, if you could get past that and get into the Holy of Holies. I wonder what it would be like in there. They're wondering. They think it would be so cool. Especially behind the curtain, I wonder what it's like. You'd want to see it. And so the author of Hebrews is like, you know what? I'll go ahead and describe it to you. You want to see it? I'll just tell you what's in there. And so he starts out by chapter 9 by just describing the temple. He says, now, even in the first covenant, had regulations for worship and an earthly place of holiness. For a tent was prepared, the first section in which were the lampstand and the table and the bread of the presence. It is called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was the second section called the most holy place, having the golden altar of incense and the ark of the covenant covered on all sides with gold. It was a golden urn holding the manna and Aaron's staff that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. Above it were the cherubim of glory, overshadowing the mercy seat of these things that we cannot speak in detail. These preparations having thus been made, the priests go regularly into the first section, performing their ritual duties. But into the second, only the high priest goes, and he but once a year, and not without taking blood, which he offers for himself and for the unintentional sins of the people. By this, the Holy Spirit indicates that the way into the holy place is not yet opened, as long as the first section is still standing, which is symbolic for the present age. According to this arrangement, gifts and sacrifices are offered that it cannot be perfect. There cannot perfect the conscience of the worshiper, but deal only with food and drink and various washings, regulations for the body imposed until the time of Reformation. And that sounds awesome. When he describes the temple, it's like, well, that sounds pretty cool. I'd like to see that too. I mean, to walk into the Holy of Holies, to see the place where the Ark of the Covenant is, to see the Aaron's staff and the way it's budded, to see the cherubim. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. That all sounds good until something way better comes along. Until something way better comes along. Look what Jesus calls us to. Jesus will one day say this in John chapter 14. He says, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also." Jesus is not calling us into the temple, but into his Father's house. When I read this passage, the first time I uncovered this, I was like, wait a second. Jesus has been gone for like 2,000 years. And what is he doing? He's up there. He's preparing a place for me. How fantastic is that going to be? It says that in his Father's house, there's all these rooms, lots and lots of rooms. If you knew the 90s worship song, it sounded like that. My Father's house is a big old house, got lots and lots of room. We can play football in there. Like, it's going to be fantastic. And that's where Jesus is calling you. Jesus isn't calling you to the temple. Yeah, it would look so cool. Jesus is calling you to something better. Jesus is saying, come into my Father's house. And here's the promise, I'm going to come back for you. I'm up there, I'm making a place for you, I'm preparing a place for you, I'm standing there at the right hand of God, getting everything ready, and one day I'm going to come back and get you and take you to where I am. Church, this is a better promise. Don't hold on to the shadow promise when we can go after the substance promise. Jesus is saying, you can come into my house, and I can't imagine what it's going to be like. I can't imagine how awesome it's going to be. Can you imagine? Can you just sit there in your seat and imagine, like, what's it going to be like when we're in the presence of Jesus, when we walk into that place and we're face to face with God? What's it going to be? I can't imagine. I just can't even imagine how awesome it's going to be. But what I know for sure is that it's going to be better than anything I could ever comprehend of. It's going to be so much better than anything I could ever think on. It's going to be so much better than the temple, even behind the curtain. Jesus is not calling you to the temple or any place. He's calling you to his Father's house, if you believe. Second thing I want you to know is this. Jesus is calling us not to continual sacrifice, but to his finished work. He's calling us not to this continued sacrifice stuff, but to his finished work. Look what goes on. Hebrews chapter 9, 11 through 14 says, "But when Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is not of this creation, he entered once for all the holy places, not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by the means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the sprinkling of defiled persons with the ashes of a heifer sanctify for the purification of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience from dead works to serve the living God?" The truth about the sacrificial system is that it required sacrifice continually over and over again. Year after year, generation after generation, the high priest would enter into the Holy of Holies. He'd sprinkle the blood of goats and calves and bulls, and it had to be done every year because the blood of animals could not make people clean. It just had to happen over and over and over again. It just keeps happening, and Jesus is not asking us to keep bringing blood sacrifices. He's telling us that his work on the cross is finished. It's finished. Next week, we're going to talk about resting in that. You can just rest in it. He's telling us that his work on the cross is done. He did it. He did all the things. He lived the sinless life. He died the horrific death. He defeated death forever. It happened, and if you can believe, you don't have to keep making sacrifices for your sin. And some of the people who had believed in Jesus thought that they kept having to make these sacrifices anyway. They're going to the temple still. They don't have to, but they're still doing it. They're still showing up and making these sacrifices. And the Bible is saying you can stop because those sacrifices were not making you clean anyway. Only Jesus can do that. And the sad thing is that there are still people who live by some type of sacrificial system. Oh, it might not be the same sacrificial system, but there are people that walk into churches, that walk into Christian churches just like this, that are still living in some sort of sacrificial system. They think that if they just do more good than bad, then they'll end up in heaven with Jesus. They think if they just give enough money away, they'll end up in heaven with Jesus. They think if they'll just serve enough, they could end up in heaven with Jesus, and they're cheating themselves out of the relationship that's available. They've built their own sacrificial system. This week, Jared sent me a study, because Jared would read studies. He would read studies and he would send them to me. And it was this study that tells all this stuff. And there was way more data than I cared to take in. But one of the things really struck me was that Christians that were whatever, like a survey given to Christians that would consider themselves evangelicals, Christians that would have similar beliefs to you and I, said 40% of them said that they believed that if they just did more good than bad, they would end up in heaven. And I'm like, what kind of weird sacrificial system is that? No, the way that you get into heaven is you believe in the finished work of Jesus. You believe in his life, death, and resurrection, because there is literally nothing you could do to earn it. But some people are walking around trying to sacrifice. Like, well, I was going to go to the football game today, but I'll sacrifice and come to church, I guess. I was going to sleep in this morning, but I guess I'll sacrifice and go over there to that church, see what Mike's got to say. Maybe it'll be funny, probably not, and then I'll come home. Jesus is not calling you to keep sacrifice. He's calling you to believe in his finished work. Third thing I want you to know is Jesus is calling us not to mediators, but to himself. You see, the way the system used to work is you used to have to go and talk to a priest or go and talk to a prophet. And Jesus has come and said, I'm calling you to something better. I'm calling you to me. Hebrews 9:15 says this, therefore he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, since a death has occurred that redeems them from the transgressions committed under the first covenant. Under that old covenant, there was this mediator between God and man. There had to be like a go-between between God. Like God couldn't talk to us, and we couldn't talk to God. So there was this mediator. There was somebody that had to be there. A prophet or a priest would get a word from God, and then that guy would share it with the people. And then the people would sin against God, and they would make a sacrifice, and that guy would do it on behalf of them. There wasn't like a direct contact. Like you had to go through somebody to get to God. Like that's how it worked. But when Jesus came along, he became the mediator, and now we can go directly to him. That's why in 1 Timothy chapter 2 it says, for there is one God, and there is one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. That is the mediator. I'll read it again. For there is one God, and there is one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. Jesus said, come to me. You can come talk to me. We can talk to Jesus whenever we want. We don't have to make an appointment. We don't have to stand in line. We can just talk to Jesus. You literally can't even make an appointment anymore. Here's a little true story that happened to me. On Thursday, we have a tree in our backyard that needs to be trimmed. If you know a tree trimmer, I'd love to talk to you. That's got nothing to do with this sermon. But I made an appointment with a tree trimmer. I made an appointment. I called 2 weeks ago, and the tree trimmer was supposed to come to my house on Friday. Supposed to come on Friday morning. And then I got a text on Thursday night, and the text said, sometime tonight or tomorrow morning, you'll receive a text letting you know when the appointment will be. And I was like, oh, this is weird. It's like an appointment to get the appointment for when I'll maybe get the appointment. Okay, I'll just go along with it. And so Thursday night comes and goes, no text, no call, no nothing. Friday morning, I wake up in the morning time. Morning starts at 4 o'clock. I wake up in the morning time. I guess tree trimmers don't get up that early, so I waited. And I waited, and I waited, and 4 o'clock became 5 o'clock, became 6 o'clock, became 8 o'clock, became 9 o'clock, that's lunchtime. Now I know I'm past morning. But Penny said, be graceful. And I waited until 9:30. And then I called them, and I said, I was graceful for 30 more minutes. And I called, and I said, nobody has called me about my appointment that I had an appointment for the appointment of. And they were like, Mr. Lee, we're so sorry. It's still morning. And I was like, okay, well, what time do you think you would come? And they said, sometime after 1 o'clock. Ha! That's not morning. You can't even get an appointment with a tree trimmer. But God would say, you can come directly to Jesus. You can't get a tree trimmer to come to your house. But you can talk to Jesus whenever you want. This is so good. There's nobody between us and him. We can go to him with the good stuff and the bad stuff and everything in between. We can bring him our joys and our sorrows. We can be in his presence anytime we want. Jesus is calling us to himself if we can believe. And what will we do when we get to him? What will we do when we get there? Well, this is our fourth point. Jesus is calling us not to rules and rituals, but to relationship. Jesus is calling us to a relationship with him. We can have intimacy with him. We can be known by him, and we can come to know him. We can get all the good stuff that we get in relationships. Look what it says in Hebrews 9, 16 through 27. It talks about the old way, and then it compares it to the new way. It says, for where a will is involved, the death of the one who made it must be established. For a will takes effect only at death, since it is not in force as long as the one who made it is alive. Therefore, not even the first covenant was inaugurated without blood. For when every commandment of the law had been declared by Moses to all the people, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book itself and all the people, saying, this is the blood of the covenant that God commanded for you. And in the same way, he sprinkled with the blood both the tent and all the vessels used in worship. Indeed, under the law, almost everything is purified with blood. And without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. Look at what's going on, rites and rituals and mediators. Moses is talking to God. Moses is getting the information, and then he's sprinkling blood all over the stuff. He's sprinkling blood on all the people and all the stuff and all the holy stuff and all the things that were. He's just sprinkling blood all over the place. How much blood should we sprinkle? Well, I don't know about this much blood. They're just sprinkling it over and over again. And I'm not making fun of the old system at all. Don't hear that. What I'm telling you is that the old system was doing what it was supposed to do, which was point us to Jesus, and it was not doing what it could never do, which is bring us close to Jesus. All of it was pointing us to Jesus. None of it was bringing us close to Jesus. It goes on to say, thus it was necessary for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites. It's another word for rituals. Purified with these rites. But the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ has entrusted or has entered not into holy places made with hands, which are copies of on our behalf, nor was it... For Christ has entered, not into the holy place made with hands, which are copies of the true things, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. Nor was it to offer himself repeatedly, as the high priest enters the holy places every year with blood not his own. For then he would have had to suffer repeatedly since the foundations of the world. But as it is, he has appeared once for all at the end of the age to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment, the blood of calves and bulls, scarlet wool and hyssop, the sprinkling of blood, all of these rituals that had to be completed because of these sins were committed. Over and over and over again, they're having to complete these rituals because they keep sinning. It sounds like a cycle. It's a cycle that sounds like this. God gives people a law to follow. The people break the law. The law points out their sin. They make sacrifices to atone for sin. Repeat. The people see the law. They break the law. The law points out the sin. They make sacrifices for the sin. Repeat. The people get good at the law. They know the law. They study the law. They ask other people what the law says. They sin anyway, because that's what sinners going to do. And then they have to make more sacrifices. It just keeps going and going and going. And then Jesus comes and says stuff like this in Matthew 11:28, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Come to me and I will give you rest. Think of how exhausting the sacrificial system would be. Oh my goodness, I've sinned again. Now I've got to bring a calf over there, and the priest is going to have to kill it and sprinkle its blood everywhere. Oh my word, I've sinned again. I'm going to have to bring something else over there, and the priest is going to have to kill it and sprinkle its blood. And Jesus says, just come to me and I'll give you rest. Jesus isn't calling us into these rites and rituals. He's calling us into a relationship. Jesus says, come here. Just get close. He's calling us to closeness, to intimacy, to relationship. And if we're not careful, we can turn our relationship right back into rules and rituals. Church, listen to me right here. If you've tuned out a little bit, I'm talking to the church. If you think, well, is Mike talking about the Hebrews? No, I'm talking to the church. If you're not careful, if I'm not careful, we can turn this relationship right back into rules and rituals. if we only pray when we need something, if we only pray before a meal, if we only pray without thinking about it or considering stuff, if we only open up our Bibles on Sunday mornings or in group, if we only give of our time and our talents or our money, but without joy, if we show up here to check off some box, that's not relationship. Church, if you walk in here and you're like, well, I came to church, check. I gave my money, check. I sang a song, check. I sat quietly during the sermon. I didn't check the football scores on my phone. I didn't see what was going on the Facebook or the reels. Check, check, check. I got here and I ate the bread and the juice. Check, check. I served on a team. Check plus check, because Pastor Mike likes me to do that. I went to group. Check, check, check. Wow, now I'm really winning favor. If we do all of that and then think, well, now I can leave because I did the thing, that's not relationship. Jesus is calling you to so much more than that. He's calling you to something so much better than that. Jesus is calling you to an intimate relationship with him, and he's done everything to make that possible, and now we can have all of him that we want. Have you ever had a season in your life where you wanted more of something? You just want more of it. I want more of a relationship with this person. Maybe you're going through a season where you're working opposite shifts. There was early on in our marriage, we were both working as wait staff and both going to college, and it was kind of crazy. And it made it so we just wanted more time around each other. We just would want more time around each other. Or maybe you have people that you love that live a long way away, and you would love to have more time with them. And it's not that you're mad at them or they're mad at you. You just can't get as much time with them as you'd like. And what you want is relationship. What you want is closeness. And you just can't get it. Some of you have kids that have gone off to college. This morning I have a daughter, and I have daughters every morning, but this particular daughter is up in Prescott this morning. She's in college. She's up in Prescott this morning. And what I want is not for her to be back in the zip code or back in Maricopa County or whatever. I want her back here so I can give her a hug. That's what I want. She's away, and I'd love for her to be close. And I can't always have it. But here's something that I heard this week that was so cool that I have to share it with you. You can have all you want of Jesus. Church, you can have all you want. He would say you can have all of it. You can have all the Jesus you want. You can pray all day. You can pray throughout the day. You can read his word. You can worship him. You can have all the Jesus you want. And nothing else in your life is like that. None of us can have all the money we want. Wouldn't be good for us even if we did. We can't have all the stuff we want. We can't have all the rules we want. We can't have all the security we want. We can't have all the time we want with the people we want to have it with. But we can literally have all the Jesus that we want, and Jesus is calling us to it. He's calling us to a personal relationship with him if we can believe. If you can believe. And finally, church, Jesus is calling us not to sacrifice, but to salvation. Jesus isn't calling us to sacrifice. Sure, when you follow Jesus, you might find yourself just saying no to things you used to say yes to, but at that point, it won't even really be sacrifice. Because the Holy Spirit will be doing a work in your life and you just won't want it anymore. There's things that I wanted before I knew Jesus that I just don't want anymore. And so now that I don't want them, not doing it isn't even really sacrifice. I just want more of the Jesus stuff and less of the other stuff. This is what the Bible closes out with. Hebrews chapter 9 says, so Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. Jesus has come to make the sacrifice once and for all, and he will come back to those who are eagerly waiting for him, for the believers, for the Christians. Jesus is going to come back. And when he comes back, he's going to take those who believe in him to where he is, to his Father's house with lots and lots of room where we can play football. It's going to be fantastic. I don't think there'll be football up there, but it would be cool even if it wasn't. It would be so much cooler than playing football. For those who've said yes to Jesus, yes, I can believe. Yes, Jesus, I want you to save me because I cannot save myself. Jesus is calling us to salvation if we can believe. Not to these continual sacrifices, not to check something off a list, not to say, well, I got that thing done. Now I can go on with my day and do the fun stuff I wanted to do. He's calling us to this relationship that results in salvation if we can believe. Church, Jesus is calling you to something so much better than I think we realize. He's calling us to his Father's house. He's calling us to himself. He's calling us to relationship with him. He's calling us to salvation. So the question is, can you believe? Almost 20 years ago, a room full of 8th graders looked at me and they wondered if they could believe. They sat there nice and quiet, just like you guys are quiet right now. And they were wondering, can I believe? I knew what I was calling them to. I knew we could get it done. I knew what it would be like when we got on that bus. I knew what it would be like when they walked through the gates of Disney. I knew what would happen. I knew it would be so awesome. I knew it. And I was calling them to do it. And the question was, could they believe? Could they believe enough to just say, all right, let's do it? What would it take? Just as confidently, I stand here today, and I know that your life will be better if you believe in Jesus. Church, I'm not promising that you'll get rich. I'm not promising that you'll get healed. I'm promising you that every single moment of your life will be better if Jesus is in it. And every single second of eternity will be better if you are with Jesus. I promise you that. I say it confidently. I say it so confidently I would plant a church so that I could tell you about it. I say it so confidently that I'll get here nice and early and leverage my life to make it known to you. I believe it so much, and I wish I could make you believe, but I can't. All I can do is invite you to believe. So can you believe today? Can you believe that Jesus is calling you to something better? He's calling you to something so much better than a surface relationship. He's calling you to something so much more than checking something off the box. He's calling you to something more than some made-up version of holiness. He's calling you to himself. He's saying, come home. I want to put my arms around you. I want you in close. He's saying, I can see you. I know what you've been doing. I know all about it. I know all about your fears and your struggles and your sins. I know. What do you think I died for? Come in close. Jesus is saying, come in close and believe. Believe the gospel, that God made the world and it was perfect. And it worked exactly like it was supposed to, but then we sinned and we messed it all up. You know what sin is? If it's your first time in a church, you know what sin is. It's when we do the things God doesn't want us to do. And it's when we don't do the stuff God does want us to do. And the worst part about sin is not even the brokenness that we see, it's that it separates us from God. God's so perfect and so beautiful that he can't be around sinners. And so we were separated from him. But God loved us so much that he wouldn't leave us in that separated state. And so he sent Jesus down here. And when Jesus came, he lived the sinless life that we never could. He died the horrific death that we deserved. And he defeated that death so that anyone who would believe in him could get called to something better. Called to him. Can you believe today? Let's pray.